Happy Father's Day. Thank you for being here to worship with us on this Father's Day today. You know, I'm just about 40 years old, and if I run into a problem, I call my dad still. I know some of you Google, but I call my dad, and he tends to know what to do. And, that's what I think about dads. At least, I was going to say good dads, but I think dads who try. Dads who try, they try to show up. They try and they're good at fixing problems. They're reliable. And so because of that, guys, we got you a roll of duct tape this year. Because I think dads are kind of like duct tape. You know, they're going to solve most problems, maybe not forever, but for a while. You know, and so I don't know, most dads I know have a roll of duct tape somewhere. But as I told somebody earlier, but this will know, you'll at least see where you tried to fix a problem with these ones. So, my name is Cale Courtright, the preaching minister here, and we are glad that you're here to worship with us today. If you have your Bible, I want to encourage you to turn to Genesis 42. We're going to be there in a minute. Now, I want to kind of just catch you up if maybe you've been gone for a week or two, or if this is your first time with us. We're in the story of the life of Joseph, and I want you to imagine if his story was like a movie for a moment. Imagine how the movie would go. It starts off and there's a boy named Joseph who seems special. He has dreams from God about something, and he shares that with his family. And he's been given a coat to kind of symbolize who he is. But then his brothers turn on him. And it's not the people you would expect, but his brothers throw him in a pit to leave him to die. Well, they come to their senses, and instead of leave him to die, they sell him to slavery. He goes down to Egypt as a slave. And things are going better there for a minute, and then they're not. And someone ruins his reputation by telling a lie about him. He ends up in prison, where things go pretty good there until he's forgotten for years. And then what seems to be the climax of his story, you can imagine in a movie that he is plucked out of prison into Pharaoh's house. What we read last week, where he's able to interpret a dream. There's going to be 7 years of feast. Things are going to go well. And then there's going to be 7 years of famine. And he's the person that the story turns. And he's the person that's put in charge. He goes from, he's not Egyptian. He goes from Israel to pit to prison, and now he's running the empire. And you can imagine that this is the crescendo of his story, but for us who are reading, it's not actually the climax of his story. Because there's something deeper that's been going on, and that's the story we're going to read today. So what I want to do is, here's what I did this week. We're going to cover 4 chapters. So what I did this week is read it. I'm going to tell you the story and highlight some verses that I thought needed to be read. And so if you have your Bible, we're going to go fairly quickly, and some of it will be on the screen. So starting in Genesis 42, here's what we see. We're in the famine time. When Jacob, that's Joseph's dad, when Jacob learned there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you just keep looking at each other?" He continued, "I've heard there's grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us, so we may live and not die." 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain from Egypt, but Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with the others, because he was afraid that harm might come to him. Which, if you're just reading the story, if you're going quickly, you just read it, you keep going. Maybe Benjamin's really young, and he hasn't been on international travel yet, you know? On another hand, why would he fear the life of his son going with his 10 other sons? Jacob has some experience here. So what we see over the next few verses is the 10 brothers travel down to Egypt. And I don't know why it's organized this way, but if you need grain, you see the guy in charge. He doesn't have people working for him. So the 10 brothers stand in front of someone, and they have no idea that it's their brother Joseph. Genesis 42, verse 7. As soon as Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them. He pretended to be a stranger, and he spoke harshly to them. "Where do you come from?" he asked. "From the land of Canaan," they replied, "to buy food." This is the first turn in the story. He recognizes his brothers, but they don't recognize him. Some time has passed. We know that he dresses like an Egyptian. He probably has a new hairstyle, and he's grown up. They don't recognize him at all. Now, I want to pause here for just a second to ask you the question that if your brothers or just anyone had betrayed you like they betrayed him, how often do you think you would think about what you might do in response? He's there in the pit. If I get out of this pit, you know what I'm going to do? At that point, I'm just going to go tell Dad, He's in prison. If I ever get out of this prison. How many times has he envisioned the scenario that he comes face to face with his brothers and gets to do something about it? I mean, what about when he works in Pharaoh's house? It's been 9 years now. We're 2 years into famine. He has power. He gets to travel anywhere he goes. This is the empire, and he's leading it. What would you do? I'm certain he's thought about it. So he, instead of doing what I might do and rush into something, throw him in prison, he offers a test. Now, what he does do, he accuses them of being spies, and he holds them, which a nice way of saying puts them in prison for a minute. Maybe jail, I don't know. But the brothers, they don't know Joseph. They don't understand that he understands every word. Genesis 42, verse 21. They said to each other, "Surely we're being punished because of our brother. We saw how distressed he was when he pleaded with us for his life, but we wouldn't listen. And that's why distress has come on us." Reuben replied, "Didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? But you didn't listen. Now we must give an accounting for his blood." They didn't realize Joseph could understand them, since he was using an interpreter. He turned away from them and began to weep, but then came back and spoke again. He had Simeon taken from them and bound before their eyes. You can see here from the beginning, it's been at least 20 years probably, and this is still the dominant narrative, the story in their life, is what they did to their little brother. You can see how this burden has been weighing on the entire family. The whole family story has changed at this point. They can't get over it. Which there is a lesson in here for us. It's not necessarily the point of today's sermon, but in that moment, they had anger, they had envy, and they lashed out, certainly not expecting it to be the dominant narrative of their life. They're still thinking about it. You can imagine that it's been the only thing that they've been thinking about. Now, we don't know why, but Joseph here weeps, and it's not going to be the first time that he sheds tears in this story. It tells you where he's at emotionally. He could take revenge on them, but at this point in time, we don't have them. I don't know why Joseph weeps here. It could just be the pain of everything that's flooding in. Maybe he had tried to kind of compartmentalize his life. On another hand, you can see that he sees the pain his brothers are in, that this has been their story. He has an understanding of why this has happened. We'll read that in just a minute, but you can imagine that there are people here he cares about, and it's been a burden on them. It's the first thing they think of. This is because of what we did. And they've been waiting for the other shoe to drop. And for them, this is it. So Joseph sends them home with grain, but he keeps one brother, Simeon, and he says, next time you return, they let it out that they have another brother. You bring that other brother back. If you want Simeon to be released to you, when you come back, bring Benjamin. Benjamin is the only other brother that has the same mom as Joseph, his only full brother. Well, after some time passes, they run out of grain. We don't know how long. And so it's time to return, and they tell their dad, Jacob, we have to take Benjamin with us this time. And at the beginning, he doesn't want to allow Benjamin to go, but that must be how bad the famine is. It doesn't matter anymore what I want to do. I have to send Benjamin. So they bring Benjamin. Joseph feeds them. He watches Benjamin, and then he gives them one final test. Genesis 44, verse 1. Joseph gave these instructions to the steward of the house. Fill the men's sacks with as much food as they can carry, and put each man's silver in the mouth of his sack. Then put my cup, the silver one, in the mouth of the youngest ones, along with the silver for his grain. And he did as Joseph said. Joseph frames Benjamin, ultimately, is what happens here. And so they have all of their grain. They're headed back home. They have all of the brothers. Everything's good. They get to go home. Only as soon as they get a little bit out of town, they get stopped. And they open things up. They said, we didn't do anything wrong. Oh, looks like they stole from the guy who's leading the empire. His cup is right there. What can we say now? And they do the thing, we have no idea how this happened. We all do that, right? Anytime you get pulled over. I have no idea how this happened. I don't know. They say, he's going to be imprisoned. He's going to become a slave, essentially. He's imprisoned for life. This is the test. This is the moment of truth for them. Essentially what Joseph does here is he says, this one is staying with me, the one who's now the favorite child. He has essentially contrived a situation that they have the same situation again. Their father is going to lose his favorite son. What will you do about it? See, they have a choice in this moment. They can allow Benjamin to be taken. They can take their grain and go on their way. But they say something has to change. We can't live like this again. They've already expressed remorse. And now Joseph wants to know, did you mean it? Did you mean it or not? Will they abandon Benjamin to save themselves? Well, in this case, everything has changed. Judah is the one who's going to step up. We're going to read his story here, but he says, take me instead. Judah, the same brother who hatched the first plan to get rid of Joseph. It's Judah now who says, I can't do this again. I can't live like this. Judah tells them that, look, we had to beg our father to let Benjamin come. He has to return home. Genesis 44, verse 30, we read Judah's speech. So now, if the boy is not with us when I go back to your servant, my father, whose life is closely bound up with this boy's life, if he sees that the boy isn't there, he'll die. Your servants will bring the gray head of our father down to the grave in sorrow. Verse 32, your servant, that's himself, guaranteed the boy's safety to my father. I said, if I don't bring him back to you, I'll bear the blame before you, my father, all my life. Now then, please let your servant remain here as my Lord's slave in place of the boy. Let the boy return with his brothers. How can I go back to my father if the boy's not with me? No, don't let me see the misery that would come on my father. And on one hand, you can imagine Joseph going, now you care? Now you care how the father will feel? Because you've already done it to him before. But at this point, Joseph, he can't take it anymore. He's put them through test after test. He's seen that they seem to be a different group of people. In Genesis 45, verse 1, we see Joseph couldn't control himself any longer before all of his attendants, and he cried out, everyone leave my presence. There was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. He wept so loudly the Egyptians heard him, and Pharaoh's household heard about it. Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still living? His brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified at his presence. It's revealed to them that standing in front of him, the one in charge of everything is their brother. The one that they sold, the dream that they tried to kill, the one that they silenced is now standing in front of them. Put yourself in their shoes for a moment. How would you feel? Knowing what you did before, and now this person has power. Well, the text gives us it. They were terrified, as they should be. As they should be. Because they know the power that he has. They know what he can do. They're terrified. They think that the worst is coming. They think, we know what we did to him. What's he going to do with us? They imagine that the other shoe is dropping. The hammer is going to fall. But instead, they read this. Verse 4, Joseph said to his brothers, come close to me. When they had done so, he said, I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold to Egypt. And now don't be distressed. Don't be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years there has been famine in the land, and for 5 years there will be no plowing or reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. This, church, is the moment. This is the crescendo of the story. Yes, there's the will he get out of prison narrative, but it's will their relationship be renewed? Can God repair even this relationship? Or will he get revenge? I don't know about you, but my story might have been different. There might have been revenge. There might have been punishment. We don't get any of that. We don't even get a "you'll pay for what you did" line. He just says, "Come close." Ultimately, Joseph's story is a story of forgiveness, a story of redemption. This story is preserved for us for a number of reasons. One is which to understand why the people of God, how they ended up in Egypt, but also how you can become that kind of person. That God's people will be different. They won't lead with revenge or getting even, but rather they'll lead with forgiveness. He never, if you read that back later, you'll recognize that he never says the words, "I forgive you." But you can't help but read that story and see that this is a story of forgiveness. Will you be the kind of person who can forgive? Because there's an important lesson for us to understand today. It's part of being human. You will hurt people. You will be hurt by people. The question is not whether or not that happens, but what will you do when it does happen? How can you become a forgiving type of person? I think we see 3 lessons on forgiveness in this. The first is this: forgiveness is a process. Forgiveness is a process, not a moment. My dad loves baseball, and because of that, we watched The Field of Dreams many times growing up. And The Field of Dreams is a strange story about a guy who loses his mind, and he destroys his crops in order to build a baseball field. And he gets the same message: if you build it, they will come. If you build it, they will come. Well, some ghost baseball players start playing baseball, okay? I told you it was weird. He lost his mind. But they have one rule, basically. They can't cross the base paths. They have to stay on the field of play. Well, there's an event that happens near the end of the movie, and one of the baseball players, he knows he can help. And so he crosses the line, and in a moment, he goes from a young man playing baseball to an old man who can help somebody else. But the rule is that he can't go back. I think sometimes we think forgiveness is a little bit like that. That all we have to do is make the decision to cross that line. That as soon as we cross that line, everything will be changed and everything will be all right. It'll be different. We'll cross the line, we'll say, "I forgive you." And then it's all left back there. But I'm going to guess that you before have either said the words "I forgive you," or you have received the words "I forgive you." And maybe a few moments later or a day later, it didn't really feel like much had changed. That you said "I forgive you," but in the next moment, you're still a little bit frustrated. That night, as you're trying to go to bed, you still can't quite get over it. It's because forgiveness is a process. It's not a moment. Genesis 42 is where he first meets his brothers, but they don't come back together until Genesis 45. Between that time, they've gone back to Israel, they came back to Egypt, there's been all kinds of things. They went home with grain and they ran out. I don't know how long that takes. I don't know how long the trip is between their homeland and Egypt. Some time has passed. It took a process where Joseph tested them multiple times to see if they would be a different kind of person. Sometimes it's going to take a moment. It's going to take time for you to actually get to a place of forgiveness. What we see here is that forgiveness isn't a switch that Joseph flips. It's a road he walks. He learns to forgive over time. Often, if you've been hurt in any real way, you might move to the place where you can say the words "I forgive you," but you can't quite get there. It's a process. You're not doing it wrong. It just takes time. I think this is why when Jesus teaches us to pray, he teaches us to pray every day, "God, forgive us our sins as we forgive those who have sinned against us." And church, that's a prayer you need to pray every day. To learn, to remember that I'm going to be a forgiving type of person. It leads to our second lesson, is that forgiveness isn't forgetting. Now, one of the great American films, of course, is Men in Black. And in the film Men in Black, they have a fancy pen where you can forget something. They can change the dial 2 weeks, 2 months, whatever, and you can forget. And that'd be kind of fun to have, right? Anytime you had something difficult, let's just act like it never even happened. You might have been taught somewhere along the way to forgive and forget. Forgive and forget. And on one notion, I understand that. That to forgive and forget, it would be really nice you want to move to the place where you act like it didn't even happen because the relationship's been restored. But I would propose to you today that that's not true forgiveness. True forgiveness is not to forgive and forget that it happened. True forgiveness is to forgive and remember that it happened. To understand the hurt that has been caused and to say, I still will forgive you. After all, if you could forget that it happened, Men in Black style, why does there even need to be forgiveness? We can just act like it never even happened. What you recognize, or I want you to recognize in the story, is what Joseph says there at the end. I am Joseph, your brother you sold into Egypt. Come close, be in relationship with me. Don't be distressed. Don't be angry with yourselves. This was done for a purpose. Imagine instead a story that goes where in Potiphar's house, Joseph had been beaten and he had a head injury and he never even remembered how he got there. There's no forgiveness now. There was just forgetting. Joseph, rather, he remembers. And that's the power of forgiveness. That he knows what happened and yet still says, come close. Let's be in relationship again. Let's renew this. Forgiveness is not pretending as if it didn't happen, but rather remembering and choosing to forgive anyways. Now, I do want to say, just pastorally for a moment, that sometimes someone will claim to you, you just need to forgive and forget. And what they're asking you to do is to jump right back in the same situation that you were in before. And that's when you definitely should forgive and remember. See, Joseph does something wise here. He puts his brothers through a test to know, is there change here? Are you still the same people who are going to betray me the first chance you get, or have you actually changed? There will be times, there have been people that you know, maybe it's you, that you have been wounded, that you've been hurt in a way that you need to spiritually forgive, and yet, using wisdom, never go back in the same situation again. That you can move to a place where you forgive someone, but that you don't trust them the same. To give you maybe a light example, if you're in business with someone and they betray you and they steal from you, you need to forgive them, but don't go into business with them again. There are people that you need to learn to forgive, and yet you need to kind of keep a safe distance. What it means is that the relationship has changed, and that's okay. You can forgive and yet allow the relationship to be different. That's called wisdom. Forgiveness, ultimately, what we learn is not forgetting that the wound happened, but rather the wound doesn't get to write the ending of the story. That God does something when we choose to forgive, that it allows the story to change. And ultimately, that's because of what we see here. Thirdly, forgiveness costs something. It might be the most important aspect of forgiveness. Understanding that forgiveness isn't cheap, forgiveness isn't easy, forgiveness isn't clean. We see over the course of this narrative that Joseph weeps multiple times. There's been pain and loss here, and you can imagine that as soon as he sees his brothers, all of those memories come flooding back. When's the last time he saw his brothers? As they sold him into slavery. They betrayed him. There's pain here. Forgiveness, true forgiveness, doesn't come easy because it values and understands what has happened. Forgiveness costs so much because somebody has to pay for this wound. Forgiveness often means that you bear the cost. You absorb the wound. Rather than trying to get even or get payback, you say, I forgive you. And with grace, you allow the wound to fall away. Ultimately, forgiveness will cost you something. It's the revenge that you were owed, that you should have been able to give, to make them pay. Joseph weeps, and he chooses to bear the pain. And that's why we see in this story, this is a gospel story. Because see, You can learn to become a forgiving person. You can be, just like Joseph, bear the weight of someone else's wound in your life and yet forgive. Joseph does that. He carries the cost and he allows them to go free. Later, there would be a man from the same family who was innocent but allowed others to go free by bearing their cost. See, we created a debt that we couldn't repay. We inflicted a wound that we could not provide healing for. Yet Jesus, he bears that cost. Jesus bears that wound for us. The bleeding of Christ is like the weeping of Joseph. While we were still sinners, Paul writes, Christ died for us. Church, you can become a forgiving person when you understand that you have been forgiven. When you understand the forgiveness that has been poured out for you is when you can start to become a forgiving person yourself. We don't forgive others because the wound didn't matter. The wound does matter. We don't forgive others because it's easy. It's often not easy. We don't forgive because we're strong enough on our own. We're not strong enough on our own. We learn to forgive others because we've been the brothers before. We've stood there knowing that we deserve whatever's coming. We're waiting for the other shoe to drop. We're guilty. We're terrified. But instead we hear, "Come close to me." The one that we wronged absorbed the cost and said, "I will call you family again." How then can we not extend the same to others? So today, you might be Joseph's brothers, understanding that you have wronged someone, that you need to ask for that forgiveness. Have the humility to say, "I forgive you," or "I need your forgiveness." Instead of asking for repayment, falling on their grace instead. Today, some of you in here are like Joseph, that somebody else owes you something. They wounded you. But instead of asking for repayment, you need to offer forgiveness. Oftentimes, we ask for payment. Thanks be to God, Jesus says, "I already paid it." You can offer the same thing. This is what Joseph said to the brothers who sold him, "Come close to me." It's what Jesus says to you as well. Come close to me. I imagine that they're standing in the throne room when this happens. Now the brothers are there. He's just asked everybody else to leave. And he says, "Come close to me." His arms are outstretched. And they don't know whether or not they can trust him in this moment. He says, "Come close to me." And they don't know if this is the moment that the relationship is renewed and repaired, or if the other shoe is going to drop. I think our God stands before you and he says the same thing. Come close to me. If you understand anything about your life, though, you understand how you have caused the same type of pain. And Jesus still says, "Come close to me." He says this is a free gift, and all you have to do is accept it. All you have to do is say yes to the relationship. Amen. Here we call that baptism. That our God stands before us and he says, "You can once again be in relationship with me. You can come close to me." And before that moment, you have to ask yourself, do I trust this God with my whole life? Do I trust him enough to go and lay down my life and pick up a life with him? Our God stands before you and he says, "Come close to me." As we close today, our shepherds and their wives will be around the room. We want to invite you to pray with them. And you might be asking for two different types of prayers today. The first might be this: somebody has wounded you. If you've lived any amount of time, somebody has wronged you. Just like we've been forgiven, you must become a forgiving person. And if you don't know where to start, it starts in prayer with one of these couples. And I would invite you, I would ask you to just go and say, "I don't know where to start. I don't know how to become this type of person. But I want to learn to pray. Father, forgive me as I learn to forgive other people." Today, you might have never accepted the offering of Jesus to join him, to come close to him. Well, church, the water's ready. Our Father is ready to welcome you. The question is whether or not you're ready. we can help you with anything, once you come while we stand and sing.